Howdy, everybody. How we doing? Welcome back to another edition of this series on computer science for all, talking about equity and computer science in K-12 schools. I am Carl Hooker. I am your host. This is being live streamed at this moment, unless you're, of course, watching a recording, in which case it already happened. But if you are watching right now, this is being live streamed across YouTube, across Facebook, and across Twitter, or the Twitters, as it were. And I'm excited to invite up our next guest. This is somebody who I've known for quite a long time. We host a little show together that you may have heard about called Undisrupted. And so without further ado, let me bring up onto the stream Dr. Adam Phyall.
I'm sorry. I was picking my nose there.
Oh, no. Totally busted. So how you doing, Adam?
You know what? I am doing great. Good. You know why I'm doing great?
Why are you doing great?
I got my Xbox today, man.
That's right.
Yes.
There's some tie-in here. Gaming is a big part of it, but I know that those of you that don't know, I guess what is this? The Xbox 5, 10? What is it? The 20?
No, it's the Xbox Series X.
Xbox X. Okay.
Yeah. You know, we want to keep it very clear and focused, so as many X's added as possible, and you understand. Yeah, this has been a hard to find item, and I had to hunt it down. I actually had to get on the Twitters and follow some guy, and then he does his little flash alerts, and then it's like quick on the draw. And you know what? I got it. I got the one that they had at the Target. The one
they had left.
Yeah, when I picked it up, they only got one in, and he was like, "You're the guy," and I'm like, "Yes, I am."
So they're selling that stuff to like their other employees. I mean, I feel like if there's anything we've learned from this pandemic, it's how to be really good digital online shoppers. I feel like that's another thing, like getting those sales when they happen. But I remember when the vaccine came out, like we showed up at this local grocery store down the street, and we're like, "Oh, y'all got the vaccine?" And they're like, "No, it's gone." And I'm like, "Where did it go?" And they're like, "We gave it to all of our employees." And then they told all of their friends, and all their friends showed up and took. I was like, but that's okay. I mean, they're frontline workers. So
yeah. I saw the thing now. You can buy the template for the card online now. So
for the COVID vaccine card.
Yeah, the COVID vaccine card. You can get your template online, and
nice.
Just plug in your information right there. I do not recommend doing that.
No. So thank you for those of you that are joining, of course, on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. And I want to give a quick shout out here before we get kind of rolling, to be sure to check out. Thanks to our sponsor, Rex Academy. They've been sponsoring this series for the entire month, which is very generous of them. And they're also doing something pretty great with their company. And their company, is their motto, their mantra. The idea is to create a very simple browser-based but interactive and engaging computer science curriculum that anyone could teach, not just a computer science teacher. And they have a great course on cybersecurity I was just checking out this last week, which is interesting because it's in the news a lot right now, cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. We had the whole, in your neck of the woods, you had a little incident there with the pipeline. How did that work out? I saw some pictures. But
yeah, you know what? Gas is here in the morning, but not in the afternoon. People still haven't figured out that everything is okay, so they're still hoarding gas, but it's going to work itself out.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of that look pretty interesting, like the lady with the video with the plastic bag pouring gas into a pad. I was like, please do not put that in your car, and then she puts it in her car. But
I hope the one that I saw with the laundry basket, I'm hoping that's a fake one. I'm hoping that's somebody who's just doing that for the likes on the. Yeah, she had a laundry basket. I'm like, no one is that. Never mind.
I would hope not. But yes, you never know.
The one thing though I like with Rex, though, the one course that was pretty cool, and I'm getting into with my 10-year-old is they're becoming a YouTuber. That whole thing, because that's the thing now. that's really a thing, becoming a YouTuber. Before, you would tell kids, oh, that's not a real job on the interwebs and all that fun stuff. No, this is a real job now. And people are making a lot of money being influencers and all that fun stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty cool that you can get them started with an actual career.
Yep. There's a few of the courses right there. Not all of them. There's actually you don't see the YouTuber one in here, but that was one of the ones that got my attention too, because when I showed it to my kids, they're like, oh, because they watch these like, and they're interesting names. It's like Sniper Wolf and Cage Dragon. And I'm like, they all have these weird names, but it's like, one is like zombie makeup tutorials, which I totally appreciate. One is like the guy that goes through all the Minecraft worlds and figures out how to hack everything.
The one that my daughter watches is the one where it's a young lady, can't think of her name right now, but she watches other videos and her reactions to the videos. It's like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Oh, that was so crazy. And so literally her content is watching other people's content, and you watch her watch other people's content, and that's her content.
So is that in the course, or no? That's not in the course. Step 1: watch other people's content and see what happens. But no, I hope not. No. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting courses out there. I think the one thing for me, again, it just goes back to this whole premise of the series, which is like, how do we get kids kind of excited about computer science? And every time I look at numbers, it's always kind of a little bit depressing. I don't know what's happening there, but in Texas, there's like 3 or 4 House bills that just hit the floor. The House just
going
passed
on in Texas.
all sorts of fun stuff. Yeah, the masks are gone. I mean, there's no COVID here, but they haven't told everybody yet. But essentially, they took all the House just passed 3 different bills to the Senate, and most of these bills are centered around. One is about cybersecurity proper, like in terms of just in general. But there's another subsection that's just about K-12, and I thought that was interesting. That say, we need to be teaching kids, which is true. Like digital citizenship is like layer 1 of this, but we need to get pretty deep. And what are your thoughts on like teaching kids, how to be hackers, or how to be, the ins and outs of cybersecurity?
It's something that you have to understand. I literally today sent an email out to the staff in my school district, because we were hit with one of those spamming style emails where you click on it and all of a sudden you send that email out to everybody in your email list and all that stuff. So, and this is like the 8th time I sent this email out to the adults. So as adults, we haven't figured that out yet. And it's very important that we get our students up to speed on this, because this is the world that they live in. This is how they pass notes now. There's no more writing a note down on paper. That note is a public note that they put out on social media, whatever that platform may be. So by putting that information out there, it's very important to teach them about cybersecurity and understanding the importance of their data, who's out there trying to skim data, what can that lead to? So, because at ages of 5 or 6, we've created email accounts for these kids.
Oh yeah.
I saw this one video of commercials. I think it was a Google commercial, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, where the parents were creating the Google accounts for the kid in the womb.
Oh yeah,
they were like doing the photo. Yeah, they were like doing all the photos in the photo gallery, but it was a Google account they already created for the kid that wasn't even here yet. So that account's already created for a kid that has not stepped out. Well, however they get out of the of their mother.
The deployment process is a little bit messy at times.
But they already have their own digital identity, and they're not even born yet. So it's very important that our students understand the importance of cybersecurity at a young age, so they can ask the questions. Because here's the thing, we do a lot of things to our students without them actually saying, hold on a second, maybe I don't want you to share my information here or there. I would love for students to question me about what are we doing to secure their data, to keep them secure, because it's their stuff. And they're only going to ask those questions once they become more educated in the content and in that area. So I'm all for making sure that they have that, because they can push my thinking and have me question the things that I'm doing, because I'm looking for from a school perspective. And they're like, hold on a second, as an individual, I didn't give you the authority to share my information here. What security? I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I need to do a little more research. So, it's very important to have students on board and give them the skills to ask the right questions.
That's skills with a Z. Yes. And I think we did it was with our middle school, I want to say. We did a Google yourself challenge where we had a little workstation set up and we had students just go Google themselves, right? And, most kids, I mean, this isn't a secret, but most kids have Googled their teachers. Most parents, by the way, have also done that. In some cases, they've Googled their parents. And so I'd ask the kids, like, what are some interesting things you discovered? And of course, they found out all sorts of stuff on their parents that they didn't know, which is always fun. Like the one kid whose dad is like a used car salesman now, but back in the 80s was like a heavy metal band with a big head of hair. And she goes, I never knew my dad was a metalhead. But the one kid was interesting was he found
metal, not meth.
Metal, yes. The one kid found a picture of himself. It was in the Dallas Morning News or something like that, and it was something about a swim challenge or a swim team, the state something or other with middle school kids. And so it's him, and the swimsuits are pretty tight anyway because they have to be for competition swimming. And he was like, well, how did they get this picture? And it was just him standing on the starting blocks getting ready to go. And I was like, I don't know. You might want to follow up with them. And so he did. He reached out and they're like, well, your parents gave us the picture. And they're like, wait, what? So the Dallas Morning News sent him you're going to have to tell your parents to request to remove because they signed off on it. Yeah, like, oh, there's my kid. I want to put him in the paper. Of course, the kid didn't want to be in the paper. So it was, in some ways, it was interesting because it empowered them, to go up and look and see. This course is interesting. The one I've been playing with the Rex Academy cybersecurity course. And they got a whole thing in there, like how to create a spoof, both an email spoof, but also a website spoof. People like it can look just like Facebook. It's pretty interesting. And when I first started through it, I was like, man, we shouldn't be teaching kids this. But then I'm also thinking, well, what an opportunity to be like the white hat, the white hat hacker to be like, hey, we're going to teach you the right way to do this. Don't be the person that goes in and just destroys everything, but actually go in and finds vulnerabilities in websites and then says, hey, you need to fix them.
Yes, because it's right now, especially with schools doing what they're doing, providing so many devices, so many users connected to the internet and resources, is very important that they have those resources, because right now, not all school systems have the staffing to handle that.
That's right.
I've always worked in a district of fairly good size, so that hasn't been an issue. But you have some districts that they have a K-12 school.
Yeah.
And so the principal is also the head custodian and the bus driver. So those are those places where they don't have the manpower. So they need to empower as many people as possible to ask the right questions and to figure some of these things out.
That's where I went to school. I think I was one of 22 kids in my graduating class, and there was no way, in this little tiny high school in the middle of nowhere, Texas, that I'm going to find, and at that point I'd already gotten out of most of my classes. So like my senior year, I was just sitting there. I mean, what an opportunity to be able to say like, hey, here's an online course. This is a course in the 90s. So online courses were a little bit different back then. But, having that opportunity now, I think we can start to kind of see, especially this year. I mean, of any year, we've finally probably seen there's
time out, Carl. I got to ask you this now. So were you at least in your top 20 of your graduating class?
I was. There's an inside joke here, and that is that I was the third. I was the top 3 of my graduating class, is what I tell people, and they're like, "Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's amazing." I was like, "Yeah," but I wasn't in the top 10%. So do the math there, because third was just out. I had to be in the top 2. Dang, that I got that B in Spanish got me.
The same thing I tell them when I graduated from Tuskegee. In my major, I was number 1 in my field. I was always also the last one, because there was only one general science education major that year. Me.
That's like my dad telling me yesterday. He's like, "Oh, happy birthday to my favorite son." I'm like, hey, "Wait, I'm the only son, so I better be." Yeah. So thanks to those Twitter users, those of you that are following along. I said we have a few people that have joined us. If you're interested, you can welcome to go ahead and comment. Drop in a comment in there. We'll try to take your comments on the fly. You may appear on the show here. Just Adam and I chit-chatting a little bit about computer science for all, and we talked a little bit about cybersecurity. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go way back and step back into our past and talk about our own interest levels. You and I have talked about this a little bit on our podcast too, but I'm curious, we're both ended up in fields that are heavily influenced by computer science, whether or not we're actually the people going out there and doing the coding. I mean, I'm probably just dangerous enough to try a lot of coding and mess things up because I have a curious mind. But what about you as a kid? Was there something that hooked you into the computer science, into ed tech? What was it? Do you remember?
Gosh, you know what? It was really just understanding all the cool stuff. I mean, it was really that whole futuristic Star Wars, Star Trek, walking in the room and being able to say computer,
Yeah. Hello,
which you
computer.
literally can do now with. I'm not going to say her name because I have one right here on my desk and it'll start like chiming.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, but you can literally, instead of saying her name, you can have it say computer and it will do those things. So that whole concept of how we can automate so many processes. And that was so fascinating to me as a kid. This is even before I, decided once I started teaching to go in the direction of technology. I just always went to that field of, wow, this is something cool that you can do with in that space. And I think I shared it on our podcast when we were doing keyboarding in school. We had the keyboarding and computer. I think it was like Windows 95 at the time that we were utilizing. And this was right around the time that Doom came out. Oh, yeah. And it was crazy. So we were playing Doom in school, and our computer science teacher our keyboard teacher had no idea how computers really worked. So she's like, "Oh, I took it off, I wiped it, and you guys can't get on there." Like literally, before she finished her sentences, we were like, "Oh, BFG in my hand, running around shooting." Yeah. So they had no idea. So it was those little things like that just kept pushing me in this direction. So what about you?
Yeah, ours was the same way. I mean, it was mine was a Mario. It was a Mario typing game that was on this is you're a youngin'. It was like, I want to say 86, 87. I was in seventh grade, junior high. And there was a little game called Mario Types. And I was like, oh my God, this is I am a super fast typer to this day because I was having my little Mario guy chasing mushrooms. That could be I just realized that could really come across the wrong way. But essentially you had to jump and crush these little mushroom things. You know how Mario works. And you have to hit the letters at the same time. And every now and then like a phrase would fly over and you're like, oh, gotta do that phrase real quick. And you would jump up and go ding. And that was it. Super basic, but man, I became a speedy fast typer after that. So, and I think that's helped. I mean, I don't know. There's still games out there that exist like that, but I feel like in some ways.
My kids do one called Nitro Type, which is like, yeah. Because I remember like it was an Apple game that I did in elementary school, and it was a race car, and it was these math problems, and you had to like answer these math problems, and like the faster you could do the problem, the more fuel you got for your car, and so you had to go through all these problems, and based on how fast you did all the problems, then they raced at the end, and then you got a chance to see how your car finished based on the speed of answering those questions. But once again, this was one of those where you had to turn the computer off before you put in the real floppy disk, next game. Yeah. My kids know nothing about that.
Well, speaking of race and problems, see what I did there? Let's segue, shall we? How do we encourage and motivate students of color? Okay, so I don't know if you've seen the statistic. I'll see if I can look it up here, but it's like, I want to say 3%. Yeah, that's 3% of kids graduating high school are African American, where the population, of course, it's a lot bigger number than that nationally. I think we're at 20%, 22% or something like that. So that number, for some reason, and it's not just African American, I mean, it's kids of color in general. For some reason, those numbers tend to be, they're leaning toward, there are certain races, don't get me wrong, and we've seen this, and this is kind of probably, if you talk about stereotypes, if you walk into like a computer science room, what kind of people are you seeing in there? And there's people of Indian descent, people of Asian descent, and then, of course, English descent. But for some reason, not a lot of Black or brown students. And so what are your thoughts? I mean, how do you, and I know you've done some work in this area, so what are some ways you can motivate those students and girls too? Of course, we've talked about that too.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that is a real interesting concept or thought when you start thinking about the gaps that you have with students of color. I mean, I remember, gosh, this was time flies now. It was probably about 10 years ago. CNN did a series on being Black in America. I don't know if you remember when those things came out. And one of those it was in Silicon Valley. And you had all these Black programmers, coders, Black males, females, and it was a couple of guys who had made it, and they were talking to these up and comers. They were like, hey, first thing you need to do is find you a white guy to be your lead guy on this project, So he can go to the business meetings for you. He doesn't have to know how all this stuff works. But the whole concept was it was so few African American coders out there that no one really believed that they could do the work. Yeah. And that was about 10 years ago. So the numbers have changed to some degree, but that was one of those things that blew my mind when I saw that. I'm like, wow, I'm in a position to help change that narrative. So I made it a point once I became a director of instructional technology to director of technology, to make sure that those students had the opportunity to see other people of color that are doing those, because it's kind of, we often say it's hard to be what you can't see. Yep. And if you're always seeing people who don't look like you, then you think that it's not for you. So it's one of those things where you have to show students, especially kids who don't have the background knowledge of these things, to say, hey, here's a kid that looks like you. And the cool thing about computer science, I remember when I was in Hickman Mills in Kansas City, Missouri, majority district, and we went to a space called Cerner. They did medical equipment and stuff, and all these coders came in the room because it was computer science. We brought them in, and we focused on girls with this event, but it was so amazing that the girls or young ladies, I should say, were a few years out of college. And if you walked in the room, you probably couldn't tell which ones were the high school students, which one were the coders. And they were making six figures. And it blew the kids' minds because they had no idea that, wow, I could be 22, 23, making good money, looking like I look normally. So that was something that just like blew their mind, because that was something they weren't exposed to. So exposure does a lot for our students in that underrepresented area, where you're talking about students of color, where you're talking about girls, because you are a girl dad, totally a girl dad. I have two girls that I'm raising in my house, and it's really about them seeing themselves in those roles in that capacity. So that's step one, really putting that up front, letting them see those people that talk like them, look like them, wear the hair like them in those spaces, and then realizing, wow, I can do that. And that's something that's really important, that I think that we have the ability and the capacity to do. And this is one thing that I do as a decision maker as it relates to technology, whatever products that I'm buying. I often ask the company, hey, do you have a program, or do you have individuals that don't mind talking to kids? So, hey, you giving Scholastic all these dollars, Scholastic dollars. I'm just throwing Scholastic out there, whether it's iStation, iReady, whoever, you name a company. If it's an electronic technology company, see if they have employees that could talk to your team, talk to your students about what they do, how they got there, how did they create this stuff. Those are another opportunity, so they can see those things. Because, hey, you're giving them all this money for these products, they might as well do a little something and show you the people that are behind the scenes doing some of the work. So that's something else that we can definitely need to be asking about as it relates to getting more students, who look like our populations in those roles.
More and more of that I'm seeing too. And I want to give a shout out to Shayla, who mentions, show themselves in the field and have more conversation, normalizing it as a viable option. I love that. And then she, of course, throws a little heart there. So did Rosalind there. Hey, we know Rosalind. We know Rosalind.
Yeah, we know Rosalind. What's up, Mama?
Shout out to Adam's mom.
Mama.
Yeah, but going back to that point and what Shayla was mentioning, but also what you mentioned, and there are certain companies, and I'll give them some shout outs. There are certain companies that are doing this, and they're, Google was one of the first that I can remember. We visited the Googleplex in like 2012, I think. It was almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was just kind of wandering around. They do the tour and they want you to see certain things. But then I saw this young lady walking by, a young lady of color, and she comes by and I was like, hey, can I just chat with you for a minute? She's like, well, I'm not on the tour. I was like, I know, I'm just going to, I noticed you're getting your lunch. Can I just bother you for a minute? And so she's like, yeah, sure. What's going on? And I said, well, I just want to ask, like, how did you get here? And she's like, stop. She's like, wow, no one's like, stop to ask me that. And I was like, well, I am a teacher and I want to know like what motivated you, because you don't look like most of the people I see in here. And she's like, yeah. So she was from Columbia. She graduated at 22, and just like you were saying, she was like, they basically, Google was doing an outreach program into different universities looking specifically to increase females in the field, because I think their numbers were 30-70 back then, which was still pretty good, but it was not near 50-50. And so she was one on the outreach. She's like, yeah, I mean, I'm getting 6 figures here. I never, it was also interesting because she never had to like wash her clothes or get her, they all do that at Google for you. You know, you get your hair cut, you can get your oil changed, you can bring your dog in, you can get your dog groomed at the same place. Google gives you a little bit of everything. And I asked her about that too. And she's like, yeah, it's been nice because I come here and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner and work out. And I was like, wow, you're kind of like living here. And she's like, yeah, you know what, that's kind of sad. And I was like, okay, so maybe you're too invested in the program. They keep you there, right? You'll never leave. Yeah, lots of interesting ways. So I agree with you. I think that exposure, I think that showing them, kind of like what Shayla was saying in the chat. I mean, that's where we got to start. I am seeing, and I'm hoping this trend continues, I'm seeing more and more even advertisements in computer science related areas. Rex is doing a great job of this too, of putting a wide variety of people on the cover of that. You know, it doesn't just need to be Bill Gates and Steve Jobs every time. You know, there's other people that have invented stuff.
But I thought, matter of fact, yesterday, it was, and this is more engineering, but it was a commercial, and it was these girls going through NASA, and the young lady was talking about, this is a rocket that we're building to send people to Mars, and it was a black girl talking to them, and I was like, it's so cool because it's showing that it's breaking that narrative of what you see, because we talk about this in the session that we do about it. You know, it's not always black and white. But it's one of those things where if you close your eyes and I say, doctor, what do you see in your mind? You know, do you see a white male in a white coat with a stethoscope? Is that the first thing that you see? When I say nurse, do you see a woman? We all, they're kind of going back to that whole bias that that's kind of pumped into our brain at an early age. You know, it's one of those things we have to break that narrative. And so some people call it the woke culture or whatever, but it's definitely one of those things to have our students see themselves and see them in that role, so I can work towards that. And that's one thing that I think having computer science exposed to kids at an early age gives them that opportunity to see themselves in those roles and that opportunity. And it doesn't mean that every kid's going to become a computer scientist, but it's that language that they need to kind of learn, because everything now is so connected to everything. Yeah. And there's a lot of everything there, but
there's a lot of everything, but it's true. I think that's what you have to get to, that point. So I'm going to give you this as the last question. You've been just granted the position of, we'll call it computer science czar for the country. And in this position, you have unlimited budget.
Do I get to wear a cape?
Yeah, of course. So you have to have a cape.
I'm just saying, I gotta, not like a superhero cape. Like I'm talking about a Lando Calrissian style cape. I gotta have my Lando cape. I'm a czar. Like when I think czar, I think a cape. I'm the czar.
Okay, so you're the CS czar. That's it. Which is a lot of CSs now if you spell it out. CSZAR. Yes, the CSR, and you've been given this unlimited budget. What do you do? How are you removing barriers? How are you motivating kids? Like we're saying, Adam, figure out a way to shake up this country to get more and more kids of all types and colors, creeds, races, gender, everything, to try this out. What are you doing, or where are you going? Are you thinking marketing, or where are you going with this if you have budget for that?
Well, you know what? Here's my thing. What we have the tendency to do, especially with our students in poverty in areas where they don't already, quote unquote, have it, we use the milk mentality. Let me explain. So you know you're in those commercials back in the day, was like, and I've been drinking milk, and in a few years, and you see the kid grows up and is like all strong, or the girl's like all weird, and all of a sudden she's like, and I've been drinking milk. That's what we do with education. We tell kids, hey, you're poor right now, but guess what? If you study really hard and get these grades, you won't be poor later.
Yeah.
Malarkey. So what we really need to do is utilize some of these opportunities to also focus on getting our parents, because the quickest way to change the kids' standard of living is the people who's providing the standard of living. So also providing these opportunities for the parents. So giving them that exposure and some of these jobs and opportunities that are out there right now. So that's like one thing I would do. I definitely get the parents involved and get a greater understanding, because they missed out on a lot of these opportunities that you and I, and some of the people watching, have the ability to do. So definitely get them involved in that. And then that also changes the conversation in the house as it relates to utilizing some of these tools in science. Because going back to, it's kind of hard to be what you can't see. It's easy to see it if it's in your house.
Yeah.
It's easy to see it if that's my mama, if that's my uncle, if that's my daddy. So when you see that, it gives you that opportunity to really work toward that. Because when you look at a generation of kids that are going to college and going to higher ed and all those things, that happens if your parents already did that. So if your parents have already been to that level, you want to do it. So if your parents are already exposed to these resources and tools, you want to aspire to that. So I would say definitely giving the adults the exposure to really promote it within their households, with their kids and their programs, and definitely bring it to where the people are, where the money reside. You have to bring it to those spaces where they are. So also, in addition to schools, partnering with some of these, the YMCA programs during the summer, having some kind of coding camps and things of that nature. Your churches and things, they do a lot of these programs with students. So definitely making it more than just a K-12 space, even though K-12 is very important. That's where a lot of the learning happens, but definitely looking at as many opportunities to get this, where when they come in, if your school isn't offering a program, they're looking at you like you're crazy. So they're like, I'm getting it at the church, I'm getting it at the Y. I should be able to come in this school and get something even better than what Pastor Smith gave me. I should be coming in here and getting a program. I should be able to hop into some kind of academy like Rex and get more information and learn so many different things in this space that you have. So that's how I would fix it as a czar of CS with my cape on.
Wow. And rack 'em, as they say in the business, folks. That was that was awesome. I agree. You've hit the nail on the head there, and I don't think I've heard anyone kind of attack it at that angle. And thanks again for Shayla and the crew, Rochelle, and of course Rosalind for joining us. I think when I taught, when I used to teach on the east side here in Austin, it was 98% low economic. It was primarily a Hispanic and African American school. I taught after school classes I'd volunteer and do after school classes for the parents. And a lot of it was grandmothers that were just kind of running the household. They wanted to come in and learn how to make a resume that looked nice, or how to make a business card. And so we sat there side by side, and some of them, they didn't speak English. And I could speak a little Spanish, but I could speak a lot of coding. And between the two of them, we were able to figure things out. They paid me in tamales, which I absolutely loved. And I was like, I miss all that part of the east side. But what was great about it was that they took that knowledge back to their houses. And then one time, I think at the end of the year, we had them bring in their kids, and they sat side by side with their kid at the computer, and they got to show some of the things they learned to their student. Who, of course, the kid's like, yeah, mom, we already know all that. But it's interesting for them to see it too, because you're right. It's all about modeling. How do you do that? I love that. Well, we are over time as usual, between Adam and myself, although this is kind of an unscripted, unscheduled thing. Thank you for those of you that have been joining us online. A couple quick little promo items. First of all, again, thanks to our folks over at Rex Academy for sponsoring this event. The 3-part series ends next week when we bring in a Canadian, because we haven't had a Canadian yet. So Dean Sharesky is going to join us next week. We're going to chat with him about all things computer science and what it looks like in that part of the world. Because, we've been talking about computer science in the United States, but of course, our friends up north, we want to talk to them as well. And then just a couple of other quick things here, if I could share. One is that we are doing, I'm hosting, if you're interested, in a couple of nights. We're doing a trivia night yet again. This is NetRef Trivia. This is going to be a little bit different, though, because we're also doing something called the Not Top 10. Have you ever seen SportsCenter? You know how they do the Not Top 10 on Fridays. We're taking all of your best stories of the craziest things you've ever seen during remote learning, and we're going to jumble them all up, and then we're going to pick the 10 best oh my goodness moments, let's just say. And those people are going to win prizes. You're going to get a prize. If your story gets shouted out, you'll get a prize, as long as you're participating, of course. It's a free event. So please, I hope you would join us at mrhook.it/netref trivia.
It's going to be phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. Racket. That's May 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a certain podcast that yours truly hosts with Mr. or Dr. I should say, Adam. Yes, down here. We co-host this podcast together. This has been great. We're in season 3 of it. Wrapping it up, season 3. Just last week, we did one with our mom. So shout out to Rosalind, who's also watching on YouTube. My mom apparently is too tired. So she's like, she had to watch the kids all weekend. She's like, I'm done talking to you. I don't want to see it anymore of him.
I'm pretty sure my mom is like watching this on her iPhone laying in the bed in between sleep. So, don't worry.
We encourage you guys to check that out wherever you receive podcasts, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, you name it. It's probably on there. Just look for Undisrupted with Adam and Carl, Future Ready Schools podcast. So, yeah, that's it, man. We are out. I appreciate you taking the time with me. Everyone, of course, go ahead and go to rex.academy to check out that free course. Sign up. By the way, they're giving away a free course. If you want to take a cybersecurity course or how to be a YouTube star, you can sign up right now and actually get the course and take it for free.
Yep.
For
and
how
remember, free 99.
Yes.
And ladies and gentlemen, words of wisdom, the guac is always extra. I don't know where that came from.
That was an interesting sign off. But on that note, everybody, have a good night.